This is Food Chemistry Unit 5. We're still in Chapter 17, Fermentation. Fermentation is an enzymatically controlled change in a food product by the action of a microorganism. Now, microbes release digestive enzymes, and these can produce desirable changes in food. So they can either break down components in food or release a byproduct from this reaction. Microbes produce energy along with a byproduct such as carbon dioxide, acetic acid, lactic acid, or ethanol. Byproducts can change the color, texture, flavor, aroma, or pH of food. An anaerobic process is one in which microbes do not need oxygen and feed on organic compounds. Fermentation preserves foods and offers a variety of products. Now, Louis Pasteur was one of the first to actually study microbes, and he knew that microbes were a source of infectious disease. He worked on vaccines, which would provide immunity to diseases. So he developed the rabies vaccine. Now, in terms of the food supply, he believed alcoholic fermentation was caused by yeast. Lactic acid fermentation was caused by organisms that we now know as lactic acid bacteria. He knew microbes caused bitterness in wine. So the pasteurization process protected wine from these microbes. So he was the first to apply that heating of the liquid to kill the microbes, and this was later applied to milk and beer to preserve them. So get the name, pasteurization. That's where it comes from. Yeast fermentation. Breads, alcoholic beverages, and vinegar require yeast. Saccharomyces cerevisiae is the most common yeast. It grows best in warm, moist environments with sugar or starch. Saccharomyces itself means sugar fungus, so it relies on sugar for its energy. It feeds on sugar, honey, molasses, and corn syrup. And its dehydrated form is the packets of yeast that you can buy. Bread. Yeast fermentation, it changes heavy, dense dough into light, porous bread. The dough is kneaded or worked with the hands to develop the gluten. And gluten is that stretchy protein formed when wheat flour is added to a liquid. The dough needs to be proofed or allowed to sit in a warm environment, and during that time, the yeast releases enzymes so it can feed, grow, and multiply. The enzymes break down sugars in the dough and release ethanol and carbon dioxide as byproducts. That carbon dioxide is trapped in the dough. The pressure of the trapped gas increases the volume of the gas, allows the gluten to stretch, and the dough rises. Now, when you bake the bread, you evaporate the alcohol and kill the yeast. But the yeast is still left in the dough, and it adds to the flavor and nutritional value. The carbon dioxide expands as it's heated. A crust is formed. So your basic bread really just needs flour, yeast, salt, and water. If you add anything else, it's based on your opinion, but you can add eggs, milk, sugar, honey, molasses, spices, and seeds. These provide flavor, nutrients, and texture. Again, based on preference. Bacterial fermentation. You have three types: lactic acid, proteolytic, and acetic acid. It often causes texture changes and a sour flavor in foods. Lactic acid fermentation. Bacteria produce lactic acid as a byproduct of fermentation, and it's used for different foods. Sauerkraut. The word means acid cabbage. So this is cabbage submerged in brine, which is a 2 to 3% salt solution. The salt stops microbe growth. The salt pulls water with dissolved sugar and nutrients to the surface of the cabbage. Bacteria feed on the sugar and produce the lactic acid. So you have two different types of bacterial action here. Pickles. Cucumbers can be turned into pickles along with watermelon rinds, beets, cauliflower, okra, and onions. The pickles are washed in a chlorine solution to remove yeast or molds. They're packed in a brine solution, and lactobacillus, that's a bacteria, is added. The bacteria feed on sugars in the cucumbers and release lactic acid into the brine. This lowers the pH and gives a crisp texture and sour taste. Olives are similar to cucumbers. They just need an extra step. They're washed in lye, which is a basic solution to remove microbes. Extra salt is needed as well. Meats, you have semi-dry and dry sausages. You can add sugar, spices, and salt to meat. The sugar is food for bacteria. They produce lactic acid for a tart flavor and a softening of the meat. Salts and spices are added for flavors, and then your nitrates or nitrites are added to prevent unwanted bacterial growth. Cultured dairy products, this is your sour cream, yogurt, and buttermilk. So they start as milk, and it's got to be pasteurized first, which means you heat it up to a particular temperature, which kills unwanted microbes. Then you have starter cultures of bacteria that are added to the milk. The bacteria feed on lactose. They release lactic acid, carbon dioxide, and flavor compounds. Temperature, pH, length of fermentation, and added enzymes, these result in different types of products like your sour cream or yogurt. Cheeses. These again start with pasteurized milk. Rennin, which is a proteolytic enzyme, will be added, and a culture of lactic acid bacteria. These help make the curds or clumps of coagulated protein or casein. Curds can be heated to separate the whey out. That whey is a liquid that's high in protein that's used in other baked goods, mixes, and margarine. The curds can be salted for flavor and to reduce spoilage, and the remainder of the process depends on the type of cheese that you want. Cottage cheese. This would be the curds mixed with cream that has cultured milk added. Cheddar, Edam, Swiss, brick, and blue cheeses are aged. They're put into presses to squeeze out the juices. There's a ripening period, which allows the bacteria to remain and produce flavor, so they kind of just sit for a while. And then the cheeses are covered in wax and put in curing rooms with controlled temperature and humidity, and again, just left to sit. Swiss cheese has propionic acid bacteria added. This creates the CO2 that makes the eyes or the holes in the cheese. Limburger and blue cheese, acquired tastes. I'm fine with blue cheese, not so much Limburger, in case you're wondering. These have molds added. Limburger, the mold is added at the start of the ripening process. Blue cheeses have a blue-green mold, and the surfaces have holes poked into it so the mold can grow. The sharpness of cheese. This is the strength of the flavor and the aroma. It depends on the length of time cured. So if you buy mild cheddar, it's cured for 4 months. Sharp cheddar, cured for a year. Extra sharp cheddar, cured for 2 years. Mold fermentation. Molds create byproducts such as antibiotics, flavor compounds, and enzymes. In something like soy sauce, this is a fermented mix of soybeans and wheat. The fermenting agent is cooked rice and mold from the Aspergillus family. Tempeh is a soybean cake. This is produced from mold fermentation. The soybean cakes have a rhizopus mold added, and then it's left to ferment. Acetic acid fermentation. This is a 2-step process. So step 1 involves lactic acid bacteria, and step 2 would be the addition of another microbe. So in cheese, for example, step 1, you have lactic acid fermentation makes the cheese, and then step 2, other microbes are added for flavor and textures. Sourdough bread. Lactic acid bacteria ferments the yeast and creates a sour flavor. So Lactobacillus San Francisco, this is a bacteria for sourdough bread that is native to the San Francisco Bay Area. People were searching for gold during the gold rush days, in the area, and they would keep these starter packets of this yeast and bacteria in their pocket. So just a popular area where this became a favorite type of bread. Vinegar. Acetic acid gives it the sour taste. Acetic acid plus various liquids create your different types of vinegar. Red wine vinegar has red wine. White vinegar has wheat. Apple cider vinegar has apple juice.